Hey everyone, Professor Leis here. In this video, I'd like to go through the prompt for major essay project number 3. So let's go ahead and get started. In On Confronting the Unknown, Richard E. Miller and Ann Jurecic write that the writing prompt, properly conceived, is an invitation to embark into unmapped worlds, to improvise, to find unexpected beauty in the challenges that arise. In this essay project, we are challenged to write a research-based argument of at least 8 full pages that explores a particular aspect of a topic that genuinely interests us. Typically, in a research-based essay, we may be tempted to choose a position in a debate and find evidence to support our position. This model is the basis for the 5-paragraph essay, a model we are no longer using. However, as Miller and Jurecic explain in Habits of the Creative Mind, we know that practicing argument as debate produces writing that isn't persuasive or compelling or interesting to read. So in our classes, we ask our students to think of essay writing as a speculative journey. What's the difference? When you write speculatively, you begin not with a predetermined destination, your thesis, but with the goal of answering a question or solving a problem. You consider different routes to get to this goal. You do research and rethink your plan. You learn more and more. You write, make mistakes, and head off in new and unanticipated directions. You make discoveries. Your paper is your attempt to come to some kind of answer to your question. How are you putting pieces of information together to create new meaning? How are you connecting different ideas together to create new ideas? The goal for this writing project is not to try to convince or persuade your readers that your position is right. When released from the burden of trying to persuade our readers, we can then use our writing as a way of learning for us, which ultimately is one of the most important purposes of writing. This will also influence the tone you take in your essay. Seek to build an invitational tone, not a confrontational, adversarial, or arrogant tone. Begin by doing some exploratory research about a topic that interests you, an event, a concept or idea, a cultural phenomenon, or potential solutions to a problem. As Miller and Jurecic suggest in their book, begin in a state of not knowing, rather than committing yourself to a claim you came up with before you've done any curiosity-driven research. After a while, questions about this topic should arise. Craft an open-ended question about your topic to help you conduct your research. Open-ended questions can't be easily answered and require careful research and consideration. Embrace confusion and complexity. Don't shy away from the gray areas of an issue. So I just want to pause here and elaborate on this a little bit. So what we're challenged to do in this major essay project is to delve deeply into a particular topic or issue that really intrigues us, that captures our curiosity, that we really want to delve into and learn more about and explore in greater detail. So that's why it's really important to start with your own values, your own interests, your own concerns, the things you care about in the world. What do you plan to do with your career? That might be a starting place. Is there some sort of idea or maybe a social or political issue or cause that you're particularly concerned with that you'd like to explore in greater detail? So as Miller and Jurecic explain, it's important that we don't set out on this journey with our predetermined destination, what they say here, predetermined destination, and then just seek to find information that supports that predetermined destination or that predetermined perspective. Instead, they encourage us to begin in a state of not knowing. So this comes from the short essay we read on writing to a question. When we begin in a state of not knowing, it means that there's a lot more information for us to explore and figure out, and that would propel our research forward because we're trying to figure something out, and so therefore we need to conduct research. So that's what we mean when we craft an open-ended question about your topic. This is meant to be behind-the-scenes work, what will propel your research. So if you craft an open-ended question, An open-ended question meaning that there is more than one valid or possible response to the question, then you're likely to set out on this research journey by consulting a wide variety of sources, looking at a wide variety of perspectives and ideas, and then ultimately drawing your conclusions about how best to answer that open-ended question according to your own research and your own analysis of these different sources that you consult, right? So that's what we mean by that. So crafting an open-ended question to propel your research forward, to help you navigate your research journey. Let's continue. We are challenged to incorporate material from at least 8 credible and relevant texts, 5 of which should be found using the library's online databases. Gale ebooks and opposing viewpoints, or Gale in context, are good places to start. They are useful for providing background information and pointing us in the direction of other sources, but also use EBSCOhost to find some of your sources. How can you work with the words of others to promote thinking new thoughts? To help us gather sources for this major essay project, we'll create an annotated bibliography, which has its own prompt. And just a note on this, there's another video where I explain what the annotated bibliography is. So after watching this, you'll want to take a look at that video as well. So these databases, I have another video where I will take you through the process of accessing the library's online databases. So some of the most notable ones are Gale ebooks, or opposing viewpoints, or Gale in context as it's also called, and then EBSCOhost. So these are some common databases that you can consult to find sources. So overall, by the time you submit your polished draft of Major Essay Project 3, you need to have at least 8 credible and relevant sources in your essay. Now, of those 8, you need to have at least 5 that come from those libraries, the library online databases. Okay, so that's really important that you take a look at that video where I demonstrate that process, because you'll need to use that process to find at least 5 of your sources. Before committing to a topic, think about your own interests in the world. What are your career goals? What are your hobbies? What sparks your curiosity and imagination? Topics that we have a personal stake in tend to be more interesting to research and write about, and consequently more interesting for our audience to read about. Rather than researching the topic generally, however, try to find a specific conflict, issue, or question within this topic. We want to be as narrow and specific as we can for such a short paper. Now, some of you might be thinking, oh, 8 pages is not a short paper. And yes, that is true. But in the grand scheme of things, 8 pages isn't enough to take on the world's problems and solve all the world's problems. It's just not enough space to do it. So in that respect, it's a relatively short paper. And so we need to make sure that we are being very specific with the topic that we're researching. We can't research a topic overall and try to talk about a bunch of stuff that falls under the umbrella of that topic. Otherwise, we'll be way too vague and not specific enough. And so we want to make sure that we are zooming in on a particular aspect of a particular topic. So just as to give you an example, some of you, I know just based off of other essays that I've read and things that I've read from you, you're concerned with things like climate change. Now, climate change overall is a very, very, very broad topic. There are so many aspects that fall under the umbrella of climate change. So you can't just say, I'm going to go set out and write an essay about climate change, because that's just not going to be specific enough. But when you zero in on a particular aspect of climate change, for example, looking at maybe your community or things that affect your community, or we live in Southern California, so examining how climate change might affect concerns with Southern California, that is getting much more specific, and then you can look at things, particular aspects of it. So that's just a kind of a brief example of that. So again, start with what you're curious about, what you really want to research. Don't just choose a topic at random because you think it's going to be easy. Most of the time it ends up being much harder. because you're not interested in it, and so you don't find the research process compelling or interesting, and you end up getting bored or turned off by the topic. So okay, so there are a few topics that I want us to avoid. So we may not write about these topics here. So let me just go through this. So there are certain topics we may not write about, not because they are unimportant issues, but because they tend to lead us into dogmatic or ideological corners that are hard to get out of. These topics include whether abortion is moral or immoral, or should be legal or illegal, whether gun control is good or bad, whether we should have the death penalty or not have the death penalty, whether immigration is good or bad, and whether a God or afterlife exists, among a few others. So the reason why I do not want you to write about these topics is because the arguments for these tend to be repetitive, meaning that the discussions centering around these topics, by and large, haven't really shifted over the years. They still kind of hinge on the kind of the basic premises, and so the discussion isn't moving forward that much. I mean, there are obviously some aspects that are, but and usually when we choose a topic, one of these topics, we are arguing from ideological perspectives, and we are very reluctant to change our minds, and so therefore we set out to try to just prove that we're right about something, and then that ultimately is going against the whole goal of this essay, which is to use writing as a mode or a way of learning for you. So that's why I want you to avoid these topics. Now, there are some, kind of satellite or related topics to these, and if you're like, oh, well, I want to write about this, but it seems like it's kind of related to that. If that's the case, then just talk to me, and we can sort it out and see. But just on the whole, I want you to avoid these topics. But that means you have the entire rest of the cosmos of ideas to focus on. So there are infinite possibilities even without these few topics here. So I want to hear from everybody about what their proposed topic might be, so that one, I can get a heads up, and then also I can kind of help steer you in the right direction of finding sources and whatnot, or narrowing it down a little bit. This essay project is your chance to put into practice all of the concepts we've been reading and learning about so far this semester, and to challenge our capabilities as writers, students, and thinkers. Be sure to review your notes and reread important selections we've covered from Habits of the Creative Mind. Resist your familiar habits and practices as writers. Try something new and exciting, follow your curiosity, take risks, and attempt to have fun while composing this essay. So I really do encourage you all to try something new and to follow your curiosity, take risks in your research and writing, because it will make it a more fruitful and rewarding experience for you. Okay, I'm going to end this video and pick it up in part 2, so stay tuned for that to make sure that you follow through and watch the second part of this. I'll meet you all there.